Open up your eyes, it's all brand new. Every wish you make can still come true. I'm an old man, but I have wishes for you.
Turn to the camera and I'm going to say, hi folks, I'm Richard Duby, and this is Think About It. My guest today is the author of this book, Uprooted, Peter Boni. Fabulous book. I would definitely highly recommend it. And what we're going to be talking about today is trauma. So, Peter, first off, thank you very much for agreeing to come here.
Happy to be here, Rich. Thanks for the invitation.
And really happy that we're talking about this subject. Can you, just for the audience, can you give us sort of a brief biography of where you're from, when you were born, things like that?
Sure. Born in Boston, circa 1945. I always attributed my persona to three things. Somewhat of a disruptive childhood, a lot of moving, a sick dad. I think it impacted my adaptability.
Okay.
I attribute my college education to many doors of opportunity that opened for me that I would not have had if it hadn't been for that. And service in Vietnam, I attributed my collaborative leadership style to that experience.
Okay, so going back to your childhood though, would you say that your childhood, and I use this term in quotes, would you say your childhood was a normal childhood?
Far from normal, disruptive, dysfunctional. 11 moves from the first grade to the 8th grade,
Wow.
11 different schools, several states. My dad was sick from age 11 on. He had unipolar depression, Rich. When he was a younger man, he could shake it off, but as he aged, he just couldn't.
What is unipolar depression?
Well, they talk about bipolar, severe ups and downs.
Right.
He was either normal or severely low.
Or really low?
Yeah, or really low.
There were no ups?
No, normal was his up, if you will.
Okay.
But when he was down, he was really down. So the last 4 years of his life, he couldn't work. He was in and out of hospitals. And by the time I was 16, after 4 years in and out of hospitals, he just took his own life.
What was his career?
He was a tool and die maker. He was a wannabe mechanical engineer who ran out of money and became a tool and die maker in his avocation.
And what about your mom?
My mom was an at-home mom.
Okay, and I know this is tough, but would you say your mom and dad had and I keep using this term normal, but what we expect as children relationship? Was there a mom and a dad fulfilling certain roles?
Well, here's some trauma that I learned from that. I learned at age 49, Rich, that my mom, then 75 years old, had a post-operative stroke. She had open heart surgery, and then a stroke went with that. And all of the locks that guarded her secret just didn't work anymore. So she spilled the beans that my dad, who had been dead for 33 years, wasn't biological. He was, in fact, infertile. And they had gone to a fertility specialist and determined three choices: remain childless, 1, adopt a child, 2, or do this newfangled thing through an anonymous sperm donor.
Okay, so,
3.
But this is at the age of 49, am I correct?
This is when I'm 49.
Yeah, so leading up to that, before you get to 49, what type of life are you leading?
Prior to my dad getting sick,
he
was just a good dad. I never had any inkling that anything was askew. Although from a genetic mirroring standpoint, I didn't look like anybody. I had his crystal blue Italian, northern Italian eyes, but I had a fair complexion, easy sunburn. 5'6" was the maximum height of any man in his family. I was a giant at 5'10".
Okay.
Athletic.
Did you take notice of any of this? Did this in some way seem odd to you?
Well, let's just say that heredity is a complex formula.
Right.
And I never gave it much thought, really.
Okay, so here you are at the age of 49, and up until this point, and we're going to get back to Vietnam in a little bit, but up until this point, you've led what most of us would consider a normal life. You held a job, am I correct?
Yeah, I was a high-tech CEO.
Okay.
In 1995 and 49 years old,
Okay, and rather successful at that point in time?
By external measures, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as your interpersonal relationships are concerned, how were you doing before the age of 49?
I was married for 27 years by the age of 49. My wife and I had marital crisis that we were facing in 1995 as well, stemming from some issues that I had as a child.
Can you talk about those, or are they guarded?
Well, let's say when I learned that my dad was sick and then he took his own life,
Yeah.
the family stonewalled it. Don't talk about it. It's a flaw. Don't let it shine on anyone. We just don't talk about this anymore.
It's a flaw. It's something to be ashamed of.
It's a flaw, something to be ashamed of, something that's sinful even.
Right.
The adaptability that I had on that was, I had, what do I call it, my Scarlett O'Hara moment, where I kind of looked into the sky and said, I'm not going to let this lick me. I'm going to get over it.
Gotcha.
And became, wanted to be strong and invulnerable for my family.
Sure. Now, as you said, sinful. Were you being brought up as an Italian Catholic at this point in time?
At that point in time, yes.
Okay, so it was a sin.
Yes.
All right. Something you had to avoid talking about, something you had to feel shame about. So go on from this point, and the problems with the marriage, and I don't want to get into anything too personal, but the problems with the marriage that you attribute to problems with the childhood, if you could at least tell us what the category was that you felt you brought over from your childhood.
My wife felt a lack of intimacy with me because I couldn't express my anxieties, my fears. I kept them very close because I wanted to be invulnerable for people and not have me be weak.
Right. This feeling of being vulnerable that you had, something that you had to protect. You felt that vulnerability in your relationship with your wife as a carryover from the vulnerability of childhood. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we go from there. You're now, we're going to get to the point where your mother drops this bombshell on you. So what instigated her to feel a need to, at that point in time, tell you this secret that had been kept for 49 years?
Well, like I said, she had open heart surgery
Right.
and then a post-operative stroke. She was in rehab, recapturing her memory. But all of the locks that guarded her secret just didn't work. And she began recounting the story of my conception to visitors.
Right.
Who said, gosh, Chick, you need to talk to your son. I can't do that, he'll be mad.
So others knew about it before you?
Yes, yes.
And were they family members?
Well, my wife told me.
How did that, I know the story, but please tell our audience how that came to be.
Well, we were going through marital therapy.
Yes.
And as a part of marital therapy, she asked me to seek individual therapy. I did so half willingly, but did so nonetheless. She apparently called the therapist when she learned from my mom my background and wanted to tell him. But he called me and said, your wife left me a message that she wanted to talk to me. Why don't you talk to her? So it went from there. I was really agitated that she was calling my shrink.
A sense of betrayal, maybe?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then she had to, she said, I was going to tell you this weekend, but you've got a lot on your plate from a business standpoint and a lot of stress, so I was going to tell you this weekend.
And just tell us how that went. I mean, none of us that I can imagine right now have gone through what you're just describing. I mean, finding out we're not who we think we are. So the bombshells dropped by your wife.
By my wife.
And you?
A sense of relief that I'm not genealogically part of my dad's
Really? That was the first
DNA,
reaction? Wow.
And anger at the same time. I was deceived and I'm relieved. How can you have so many emotions that are opposite of one another go through you all at the same time? And they rushed through me like a hurricane.
Yeah.
I was happy and sad. I was angry. I was deceived. I was relieved, and I felt enormous amount of grief The grief, because I never really grieved properly for my dad when he passed, as a result of the way that he passed. I just shut down on that. So I felt the sense of grief for him all at the same time. Disenfranchised grief, I think, is a term.
Looking back, were you angry at him for committing suicide?
Oh, back when I was a child, I was. As I got older, I understood that he was sick and he didn't want to be sick.
Yeah.
All right.
And without getting too graphic, how did he take his life?
He left his hospital in the middle of the night and jumped off a bridge.
Okay.
In icy water, and his body was discovered some 100 days later.
Okay. So you carry all this with you, which is trauma. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you have this first childhood trauma, and then coupled on that, you at the age of 49, which let's say that's middle age, okay? Middle age, I don't know if there's a measurement, if there's a Richter factor for trauma, but you get hit with another earthquake. You're at 49 and you find out you're not who you think you are. Does that cascade onto the trauma from your father's suicide?
Well, what I learned in therapy, actually, I sought another therapist after this first therapist to find someone who was more akin to trauma.
Okay.
All right? And what I learned from him is that new trauma, this identity trauma that I just had experienced, resurges old trauma thought long past. So the childhood trauma that I didn't effectively deal with to begin with resurged, all the grief that I didn't feel.
Does it come rushing back, or does it trickle in?
It was a cascade. It was a rush.
Okay.
It was a surge, all at the same time.
But we're not going to end there, because there is another trauma that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to circle the wagons and talk about them all. You're in Vietnam. When were you in Vietnam?
1969, 1970.
Army?
Army.
Okay, and
U.S. Army Special Operations Infantry Team Leader.
Explain to the audience what Special Ops did in Vietnam.
Well, my assignment in Vietnam was going into remote villages, making friends with the people, hearts and minds.
Right.
Gathering intelligence about where the bad guys were, and then seeking them out. In essence, the strategic mission was disrupting the supply chain all around the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Right.
And I was about 80 miles northwest of Saigon at the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Okay, and you saw a good deal of combat.
We saw our share.
Okay. And you held an officer's rank.
Yes.
So you were responsible for the lives of how many men?
From as little as a dozen to as many as 100.
Okay. Great deal of responsibility, would you agree?
Sure.
When you left the service, what rank were you when you left?
I was a first lieutenant.
Okay. As a first lieutenant, you leave the service, you come back to the States, and you come back where?
Oakland Army Base, November 10th, actually, 1970.
Okay. What airport did you come into?
Well, Oakland Army Base.
Okay, you flew into the
I flew into Oakland Army Base. I had a friend going to Stanford at the time, and he and his wife picked me up. Okay. He was doing his master's degree. He picked me up and said, "Come on, Pete, we're going to take you to downtown San Francisco to the best French restaurant we know."
And?
Well, I'm just about 25 years old then. And I said, I've been at downtown Saigon. I've had French food. I haven't been in the country for 15 months. What I really would like is a pizza and a beer. All right?
Of course.
So they took me to some honky-tonk outside of Stanford in Palo Alto, California. We walked in. I had my whole dress uniform on, my dress greens, all my ribbons and spit shine things and my headgear. And I didn't realize it then, but there was anti-ROTC demonstrators planning their demonstration for Veterans Day the following day in Stanford. So when we walked into the smoky honky-tonk bar, there was a hush. The jukebox just stopped playing, and I could hear the gasp of people. When I walked in, what is this, an ambush? What's going on? But then the record changed, and music started, and people started talking again. My friend said, "Oh, why don't you sit down in this little table? The service here is lousy. I'm going to go to the bar and get us something and order up." And his wife said, "Excuse me, I'm going to go to the ladies' room." So I just sat down in this little table. Well, the anti-ROTC protesters enveloped my table, just enveloped it and spitting at me all these anti-war epithets, you baby killer, this and that. In my training, if I strike you in about a dozen different places, you'll have an involuntary physiological reaction, which sets you up for another series of blows. And the ringleader was just right over my table.
Yeah.
And I picked my spot out on his body, and I was going to kill him. I thought that I was ambushed and I was going to kill him. And I got a little bit out of my chair and I said to myself, you know, San Quentin is going to be a really lonely place.
It will be.
So I sat back down, and I think he saw the ice in my blue eyes and backed off, and everyone just kind of went away. Then the lady came out of the ladies' room, and my friend came over with a couple of beers, and everything went from there.
Would you classify that as something of a flashback, in that you're going to have a reaction that the normal guy sitting at a bar is not going? Somebody comes over to a guy in a bar and starts acting tough. They're either going to try to diffuse it, or they're going to walk away, or maybe they'll stand up. But you're talking about some training that is going to maybe lethally strike this man.
Yeah, well, let's talk about flashbacks for a bit. I've had my share of flashbacks over the years, whether it be because of the humidity in insects or snakes, or the sound of a helicopter, or the low-flying jet. And they're intermittent flashbacks based upon a trigger.
Right.
But that stays with me. That anger stays with me just by being surrounded by these anti-war protesters at the table. Now, what I learned as a child to deal with trauma is to just sweep it away and be strong and invulnerable, all right? Yeah. So I swept that away. I was strong and invulnerable. Actually, I left that restaurant, told my friends I was a little claustrophobic, and let's go outside. I'm going to go outside, pick up the pizza, and bring it back to the apartment. I'm a little tired and jet-lagged. And I went outside crying my eyes out on that. And I told myself then, another Scarlett O'Hara moment, I'm just going to get by this thing and not look at it again and just live my life. So another chance to deal with the trauma, suppressed. I suppressed the trauma as a child. I suppressed the trauma as a young adult in Vietnam.
Now let's be clear here. You were suffering from what was later classified as PTSD, but so the audience understands, when you got out, there was no such thing as PTSD. PTSD was not a diagnosis until the 80s. So when you got out, you had battle fatigue, whatever they wanted to call it, and the solution for what was wrong with you was to go and play 18 holes of golf or go to the beach and relax, and you'll get over it.
Just camouflage it. Nobody wanted to know. I didn't want anyone thinking I was a baby killer either, so I just didn't talk about it.
Right, and returning soldiers from Vietnam had unlike today, when you got back, you didn't get into any Red Sox games for free, I take it, right?
No.
And they didn't stand up and cheer you, and nobody said, thank you for your service and welcome home.
Yeah, I heard that for the first time after 9/11, actually.
Okay, so that's quite a chunk there, you know. So you come home, and your feelings of trauma and something of isolation from your childhood, now you're further isolated, because now you're a Vietnam vet. Nobody has sympathy for you.
Yeah.
You know, even those in your family probably had a little bit of a standoffish attitude towards you. Would I be correct in that?
No, I don't think you would be correct in that, but I just didn't talk about it.
Okay. Did anybody ask you about it?
No, they didn't.
Why?
Maybe I just shut down on it. Maybe my body language said, I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay, so you go on now. So now here you are. You have, at the age of 49, once again the cascading effect. When do you realize that, you were talking about the therapist that you were involved with. When do you realize that you need help? I mean, as a returning vet, you're not going to ask for help. As somebody whose father committed suicide, you grew up with it, you're not asking for help. You're starting to have some marital problems, you ask for help. But the help is not focused directly on exactly what is your problem with trauma. Am I correct?
Yes.
What do you do next?
Well, I sought a therapist. My friends and my family, after this identity trauma, suggested that I go to see a therapist. in earnest.
Yeah.
And I had to say that I needed to do that. But I subscribe to the old school of thinking on this too. If you were weak and needy, you sought a therapist, and maybe you were unfit for command. Well, at the time I'm a CEO, I didn't want to let it be known that I was seeking therapy, but I needed it. And when I found the right therapist and was going over some of my background in the first meeting, he told me, "Son, you hit a trifecta. You hit a trifecta because of this new trauma rekindles old trauma, thought long past. So to treat you," he said, "I got to deal with the childhood stuff. I got to deal with the Vietnam stuff, and let's also talk about this identity thing that we're going through."
And did they? Did
Well,
he?
I never worked so hard in all my life, and on top of that, we were doing marital therapy at the same time.
So this is you're in the eye of the storm here, or you are the storm. Let's look at it that way. You're getting treated for, as he said, the trifecta. Yeah. What do you attack first?
Well, we started chronologically.
Okay.
All right, and we started the childhood stuff, and all of the secrecy around my dad's death, and all the feelings that I had of being flawed as a result of the way he took his own life, and went from there, and talked about how my behavioral adaptation there that I thought was successful, I employed also for Vietnam.
Yeah. Now, you just reacted to the fact that you didn't want it known in your business life that you were seeking therapy. Did you feel that if somebody in your business, in your career, knew that you were seeking therapy, it would have had the same effect as somebody under your command in Vietnam thought you were seeking therapy?
I've seen this in both the war room as well as in the boardroom.
Yeah.
You know, if you're seeking some help, maybe you're a little weak.
Does that have to do with masculinity?
And needy, maybe so, but weak and needy and perhaps not fit for command.
Well, the reason I ask, because and this is a hypothesis, so just your opinion on this. If a woman were seeking counseling for trauma that occurred to her, I don't know whether the reaction would be the same as a man seeking therapy for trauma.
Perhaps it's gender biased.
Yeah, that's my point. So could it even be gender biased with you? In essence, as a man, I'm not comfortable with therapy.
I was the protector, the masculine protector. I needed to be strong and invulnerable from my family.
And when did you, I'm going to use a term here, when did you sort of surrender to the fact that all these pigeonholes that we put ourselves in, you had to be strong, you had to be a protector, you had to be the one that can kill somebody with one blow if you or your wife were in that situation. When did you realize that you put that mantle on yourself, or maybe society put it on you, but you didn't have to live with it?
Yeah, I was through therapy, actually fairly early on in the first year of therapy, coming to that realization, if you will, that my adaptability in dealing with trauma was improper in order to heal.
Okay. Do you feel that the authoring Uprooted is part of your therapy?
Oh yes, very much so. I'll talk about the authoring a little bit.
Yeah, please.
When my mother spilled the beans and I was looking for information, there was no records kept. It was an anonymous sperm donor. I wanted to know. I had this rage of genealogical bewilderment, it's called. The coin termed in the 1960s by a pair of psychologists looking at adoptees and their sometimes sense of belonging, or the absence of a sense of belonging. Well, I was wanting to know what my genealogy was. I'm from not Northern Italian, what am I?
Yeah.
What about my health history?
Sure.
If that is not important, why does every doctor ask you?
You mean, I was going to say, you mean those forms that we fill out to ask if anybody in your family?
And then I asked myself, I'm raised as an only child. Did I have any siblings? Did I ever date a sibling, or worse? I don't know. There was no records kept. My mother had sketchy information that were clues that were really not clues at all. And all I could do was to do a deep dive of research into the very science that enabled my creation to begin with.
Okay.
So I started visiting Harvard Medical School's library and Boston Public Library. And
Yeah.
so much so that I was on a talking basis, on a first name basis with a number of the staff that treated me like a PhD
Doing your thesis,
student. So I learned a lot about this industry, an unregulated industry that enables now the conception of a dozens or even 100 or more siblings from the same donor with nobody's knowledge, or offspring from the same donor with nobody's knowledge. So anyone who thinks that it's okay to have 100 siblings that you don't know is not tuned to anything that's ethical.
So literally your concern about did you date a sibling or worse is an actual concern.
Yeah. Now, I learned that I'm not part of the frozen sperm generation. It was all fresh at that time. And my parents used a doctor who was ethical and not using his own sperm on dozens or 100 patients or more. And that has happened in the past. So I'm not likely to have 100 siblings, but I'll never know. How many do I have really? I don't know.
Do you know for a fact, was it as costly then as it is now? Because I have followed up on what the costs are for this, and it's just astronomical.
Yeah, my mother told me that there was a pass-through expense of $25 from the donor to them, fresh sperm. Now, when I told my friends about this business that I learned, the business practices I learned, I had one of them that said, you know, Pete, I used to raise Rottweilers, used to breed Rottweilers.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there's more regulatory oversight
there is
to breed puppies than there are to conceive human beings.
Yeah.
And when he told me that, I thought, you know, what I learned here, it could be a thought-provoking book, but I couldn't write the book until I finished my story.
Right.
To finish my story, I needed to know what my origins were. I needed to know my genealogy and my health history and whether I had siblings.
So how do you do that? How do you go about that?
Well, science caught up with me. 12 years after I had learned, there's this new company called 23andMe.
Yeah.
Right? And they were the innovation of the year in 2008, the invention of the year according to Time magazine.
Right.
Now, by that time, I left the operating roles as a CEO in high tech, and I was working in venture capital.
Okay.
And I had a life sciences advisory board, and they were all excited about this new company, 23andMe, because of the impact it might have on this thing called personalized medicine. Well, they didn't realize it at the time, but I was excited about it so that I could learn my genealogy. So I was one of the early customers for 23andMe.
All right.
And it cost, how much do you think then?
I have no idea.
$999.
That's a lot of money. $1,000 back then.
$1,000.
Yeah.
And you know, today it's a list price for $99.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a summer sale now on Ancestry.com for $39.
I just did it.
Yeah.
You stimulated me through this book to do it, so I did it through Ancestry.
So I got my results from 23andMe in 2008.
Yeah.
Now, from 1995 to 2008, I didn't know anything, all right? And there was no technology around. So I learned that, okay, I'm not Northern Italian, I'm a little English, French, and a sliver of Scandinavian. Well, I can live with that.
Yeah.
But the database of customers hadn't accumulated yet that I could find anyone who was paternal.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'll just let that database grow, and over a period of time, I will learn. Well, 9 years later, I'm really frustrated as heck, and there's nothing that I'm finding from a paternal standpoint. My son came to me and said, you know, Dad, there's this company called Ancestry.com that used to play only in the family tree tools.
Right.
But they entered the DNA field 5 years ago, and now their customer base is larger than 23andMe. And at the time, it was Thanksgiving of 2016, we saw the Black Friday advertisements for $49.
And you did it.
And well, it took me a little while to do it, but I ended up doing list price for $99 in the spring. And by the summer, by the end of the summer of 2017, I had a strike of a relative, close relative, first cousin, who embraced me, and she was a home run because she basically worked with me and told me that she would find the source of my seed in her family tree. And 3 weeks later to the day, on September the 19th actually, in 2017, she called me and gave me the news.
So now you were you. At that point in time, you were you. What does that feel like?
Well, it was freeing, you know. It was a freeing feeling to, not only did she tell me what I was and where I came from, but the whole health history, the whole family history, the whole genealogy, and she befriended me as well. She was a home run.
So did she introduce you to anybody else in the family?
Yes, I met her family as well. Yeah.
Okay. And what was that like? I mean, this is your family now.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was interesting. She was really embracing, absolutely a home run. I met her sons separately. One was really embracing Uncle Pete immediately, and the other one really standoffish.
Okay.
Had a quiet moment. Don't expect me to treat you like an uncle or anything. Oh no. I'm just treat me like I'm a really close friend of your mom. Well, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right? But we have now a very nice friendship that's been 7 years in the making now.
So you are in ways a very unfortunate man and a very, very fortunate man, because
Well, I hit a home run here to understand where I really came from.
What could be better? I mean, I don't care if you do it now or you do it when you're 85 years old. The accomplishment is just overwhelming, because it's not simply a voyage of discovery genealogically. It's personal. You have a sense of place now. You know where you are in the world. Before we run out of time, trauma. We've talked a lot about it today, but seeing as you are a person who has been through several incarnations of trauma, if people in the audience have been through personal trauma, is there any advice? And I know advice is easy. You know, everybody has an opinion on everything, but I hate to say it, but you're sort of a pro at this right now.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Rich.
Is there any?
What I learned in this, my own navigation of trauma.
Yeah.
First of all, acknowledge it. You can't fix what you can't see, so acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Seek as much information as you can about it. Get some help. I got help with therapists. There are support groups out there of people like you. I thought I was 100% alone, and I find now that there are support groups for people like me.
Yeah.
So get some help.
And work. It's not something you could do as a dilettante, I take it.
No, you have to commit to it.
Yeah. It's hard, right?
Yeah, it is. It is hard.
Yeah.
But anything worth doing is not easy.
Yeah. And I take it you came through the other side of this. Of course, I just happen to know your wife, Sue. You came through the other side of this. You've been married how long now?
56 years now.
Okay, so that sort of sounds like it worked out. You know, I don't want to be Pollyanna.
Well, it's been a lot easier for me than it has been for her.
I would imagine it's always tougher on those. I cannot thank you enough for coming in. I hope actually we can do it again, because I think there's more to this story that the audience will be fascinated by.
Let me just finish the answer to the last question.
Please.
Navigating trauma. After you seek the information and get the help, reveal. No more secrets. Revealing, my book, it was healing by itself. So reveal who you are and what you are and the trauma you had.
Okay, and I'm going to extend the program a little bit farther.
Forgive yourself and others for this. And for me also, see if you can help somebody else go through their own trauma.
Okay. Now when you say reveal, there are some traumatic incidents or continuing set of incidents that are incredibly painful. They can cause shame, they can cause anger, whatever the emotion that they stir up. And when you use the term reveal, do you mean reveal the entire trauma? Is it necessary to go into micro detail as to what the trauma was, or is it where does that end?
To the people that are close to you,
Yeah.
reveal.
Okay.
Reveal everything, really, to the people that are close to you. With the concept of no more secrets. Secrets are just poisonous.
Okay.
All right? But I revealed more than I ever thought I would in a book, and now it's public.
Yeah.
All right? So my way of doing this isn't for everyone, but my concept is just reveal, because secrets are poisonous.
Got it.
And I found it healing to reveal.
Got it. Well, once again, thank you. And folks, he referenced the book, I referenced the book, Uprooted. It's incredibly helpful. If you've been through trauma, if you know somebody who's been through trauma, or if you just want to educate yourself on trauma, I would highly recommend it. Peter, thank you very much. Folks, that's it. I hope that we gave you all a lot to think about, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Think About It. Good night.
Open up your eyes, it's all brand new.